My daughter-in-law introduced me at the company party as the cleaning lady who won't go away. Little did she know that I actually owned the building they were celebrating in. Before we continue, first let me thank you for watching Granny's Voice. Please subscribe and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We might give you a shout out in our next video. Today's special shout out goes to Sandra Stevenson from Fernandina Beach, Florida. Thank you for being part of our family. Now let me tell you my story. I never thought my own son's wife would say such mean words about me. "Oh, this is Betty, Tom's mother," Linda said with a fake smile. She used to clean houses before Tom's dad died. The fancy party got very quiet. I stood there holding my old purse, wearing my best blue dress that I saved for special days. The rich people from the bank where my son worked for 10 years looked at me strangely. "She keeps coming to our house," Linda said in a mean voice. "She can't take care of herself since her husband died." My face got red and hot. 3 years since Harold passed away, and this is what they thought of me. Problem, someone who takes things from others. The worst part wasn't how strangers looked at me with sad eyes. It was my son Tom standing there saying nothing. He had a scared smile on his face like he was embarrassed. "I need to find the bathroom," I said quietly, wanting to hide. As I walked away, Linda laughed that fake laugh. "She gets upset so easily. We have to watch her like a little kid now." The bathroom was empty, thank goodness. I held onto the sink and looked at myself in the mirror. A woman with gray hair and tired eyes. A woman they knew nothing about. If they only knew the truth. If Linda only knew that the bank they were having their party in belonged to me. I owned most of it. The bank that gave Linda her fancy job and paid for Tom's nice car. The bank that Harold and I started with just one small office, working day and night while raising Tom. We used all our money from our tiny house to start it. But I promised Harold. On the day he died, he made me promise something important. "Don't tell Tom," he said with a weak voice as he was dying. "Let him work hard and earn his job himself. Don't let him know we own the bank. He needs to be proud of what he does by himself." I kept that promise for 3 years. I went to important meetings, but nobody knew it was me. I watched from far away as the bank grew bigger. I watched my son get better jobs because he was good at his work. I lived in my small house and never spent the millions of dollars that were mine. And I welcomed Linda into our family, even though she clearly didn't like my simple life. I put cold water on my face and stood up straight. When I went back to the party, Linda was talking to the important people from the bank, with Tom beside her. Her red dress cost more money than I spent on clothes in a whole year. But I didn't care about expensive things. I never did. "There she is," Linda called out like we were best friends. "Betty, come tell everyone about your little garden club. It's so cute how you stay busy." I smiled nicely. It keeps my mind working well. What Linda didn't know was that my garden club was really monthly meetings with a person who helped me manage my money in the bank. Later that night as we were leaving, I heard Linda whispering to Tom, "We need to talk about your mother. She can't keep coming to these parties. She makes you look bad, Tom. People will think you come from a poor family." "She's my mother, Linda," Tom said, but he didn't sound sure. "And she's holding you back. Mr. Johnson was watching when she dropped her drink. You want that big promotion, Tom. We can't make mistakes." My heart felt broken as my son sighed deeply. "I'll talk to her. Maybe it's time to look at that old people's home we saw." They didn't see me standing there. Didn't notice me walking away to call a taxi instead of riding with them. On the ride home, watching the city lights blur through my tears, I made a choice. For 3 years I had done what Harold wanted. I stayed hidden, letting our son make his own way. But Harold never thought Linda would be so mean. Never knew she would make Tom feel ashamed of where he came from. Tomorrow I would call Mr. Peterson, our family lawyer who took care of my bank shares. It was time to change things. Not because I wanted to hurt anyone, but because I loved my son, because I loved what Harold and I built together, and because I deserved respect. As I paid the taxi driver and walked to my small house, the same house where we raised Tom, where Harold and I dreamed about our future, I felt calm and strong. Linda had no idea who she was dealing with. The cleaning lady was about to show her real power. The morning after the bank party, I sat at my kitchen table with cold tea, looking at an old picture. Harold and I on the day we opened our first office at Riverside Bank. Just one small room with 2 desks and big dreams. I was 28, Harold was 32. We were both very tired but so happy. "We did it, Betty," he had whispered in my ear that day. "This is just the start." Who would have thought that tiny office would become the big bank it is today? A bank my own son worked for, never knowing his parents had built it from nothing. The doorbell rang, bringing me back from my thoughts. Mr. Peterson stood on my porch with his work bag. 73, he was still very smart. He was the only person besides me who knew the whole truth about my ownership of Riverside Bank. "You sounded worried on the phone," he said as I brought him to the living room. I told him everything. Linda's mean words, Tom's silence, their plans to put me in an old people's home. Mr. Peterson listened quietly, his thick eyebrows coming together. "It's been 3 years, Betty," he finally said. "Maybe it's time to tell Tom the truth." I shook my head. Harold wanted him to succeed by working hard himself. And he has. Mr. Peterson pointed out. He's earned his job. But Harold never wanted you to be treated badly like this. He opened his bag and pulled out papers about Riverside Bank. "The bank is doing great. Your shares are worth much more than when Harold died. You could buy 20 big houses bigger than whatever house Linda wants." I took the papers, looking at numbers that showed Harold's and my life's work. 26 years of hard work, taking risks and never giving up. "Did I ever tell you about the beginning?" I asked softly. "Before Riverside Bank was even an idea." Mr. Peterson sat back, letting me take my time. "We were so young when we met," I began. Harold was fixing computers for people. I worked at the front desk at the same place. We lived in that tiny apartment on Oak Street, the one with the leaky roof and broken heater. I smiled, remembering. Harold would bring broken computers home, fix them in our kitchen. I'd help him keep track of money and call customers. Those early years were hard but full of hope. Harold writing computer programs late at night while I managed the money, talked to clients, made phone calls to find new customers. Both of us scared and excited as we got our first big job. "When I got pregnant with Tom, we were afraid we'd lose everything," I continued. "I worked until the day Tom was born. I came back to answer phones with baby Tom sleeping next to my desk 3 weeks later. Those memories were so clear. Feeding Tom between phone calls with customers. Harold taking him for walks when I needed to work. Our baby growing up surrounded by the sound of computers and his parents building something special. Tom saw all of that," I said. "But he was too little to remember. By the time he was in high school, the business was successful enough that we could give him a normal life. Harold wanted him to focus on being a teenager, not on the family business. When Tom went to college, we decided not to tell him that his school was being paid for by the bank his parents had built. We sold our big house and moved to a smaller one, using the extra money to make it look like that's how we were paying for his education. We wanted him to find his own path," I explained to Mr. Peterson. "Not feel like he had to join the family business." The funny thing was that Tom found his way to Riverside Bank anyway. He got hired because he was smart and good at his job, working his way up without ever knowing. Then Harold got sick. Cancer that moved fast and was very bad. I whispered, my voice breaking. In the hospital right before he died, he made me promise. He said our son needed to stand on his own feet, that the bank would be his someday, but Tom's success needed to be his own. Mr. Peterson reached over and touched my hand gently. "Harold was a good man, Betty. But he couldn't have known this situation with Linda would happen. After Harold died, I kept most of his bank shares in my name, keeping our control of the bank. A small part went into a special account for Tom that he would get when he turned 45, still 7 years away. As far as Tom knew, his father had left him a little money, nothing more. Linda met Tom 2 years ago," I said. From the start, she made it clear she thought he could do better than his simple mother. Always making little comments about my clothes, my house, saying I needed help taking care of myself. "And Tom allows this?" Mr. Peterson asked, his voice getting sharp. Decide. He's stuck in the middle. Linda has big dreams. She sees him as her way to get the fancy life she wants. A life you could give her right now if you wanted to, Mr. Peterson pointed out. I stared at the old picture again. Young Harold and Betty, full of dreams that had actually come true. "I don't know what to do, Mr. Peterson," I admitted. "I've kept my promise. But what's the cost?" Mr. Peterson closed his bag with a loud click. "I think it's time we looked at your choices, Betty. Legally, the bank is yours to control however you want." As we started talking about what I could do, I felt something growing inside me. Not anger for revenge, but quiet strength. Harold had wanted to protect our son from getting things too easily. He never meant for me to become someone people could walk on. It was time for some changes at Riverside Bank. The next week, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. Visit Riverside Bank headquarters. Not as the majority owner, but as Tom's mother, bringing him lunch like I sometimes did before Linda came into our lives. The tall glass building downtown was very different from our first tiny office. I signed my name at the front desk, noticing how the young woman looked at my simple clothes with barely hidden judgment. "I'm here to see Tom Rivers," I said. "I'm his mother." She looked like she didn't believe me but called his office. Minutes later, Tom appeared. He looked surprised and uncomfortable. "Mom, what are you doing here?" He looked around nervously like he was worried someone important might see us. "I brought your favorite," I said, holding up the bag with his lunch. "Tuna salad on wheat bread." His face got a little softer. "You didn't have to do that." He took me to a small break room instead of his office. Understood. He didn't want his co-workers seeing his unfancy mother in his workspace. As we sat, I noticed dark circles under his eyes. "You look tired, sweetheart." He rubbed his forehead just like his father used to do. "Big project. Linda's been stressed too. She really wants that house in Pine Ridge Estates, and we can't afford it unless I get this promotion." I knew Pine Ridge Estates. Very expensive houses where bank executives and rich families lived. Way more than Tom's current paycheck could buy. Even with Linda's part-time job decorating houses. "That's quite expensive," I said carefully. Sighed. "Linda says it's the right neighborhood for someone on my career path. She's already talking to people about fixing it up." He smiled weakly. "You know Linda, once she decides she wants something." I certainly did know. After lunch, I asked to use the bathroom. Instead, I took a different path, walking around the bank that Harold and I had built. I recognized some old workers who smiled politely, not knowing who I really was. The executive floor was quiet. Most people at lunch. Linda's voice came from a meeting room with the door slightly open. She wasn't supposed to be here today. Curious, I stopped to listen. "Trust me, Marcus, it's perfect." Linda's voice sounded too friendly in a way that made me uncomfortable. "Tom gets the promotion, you get the contract, and I make sure everyone's happy." A man's voice, low and amused. "And how exactly do you plan to convince the board?" "They're very careful about the new computer system project. Tom has a presentation next week. I've helped him prepare it. Once he's assistant manager, he can push through your proposal easily." "And what does your husband think about you meeting me like this?" Linda laughed. "Tom sees what I want him to see. He's so desperate to impress people. It's almost too easy." I leaned against the wall, my heart beating fast. Was Linda cheating on Tom? Or was this some kind of business trick? "There's still the matter of the mystery owner," the man Marcus said. "No one seems to know who controls those shares since old Mr. Rivers died. Tom says his father left everything in a special account. The shares will come to him eventually. Until then, we work with what we have." Speaking of which, there was silence, then sounds that confirmed my worst fears. I hurried away, feeling sick. Back home, I called Mr. Peterson right away. He came within an hour, bringing along Mrs. Davis, the former head of numbers at Riverside Bank, who had retired last year but still helped me at board meetings. Linda's involved with someone named Marcus, I explained. They're planning something with a computer system project, and she mentioned Tom's presentation to the board next week. Mrs. Davis's face got dark. That would be Marcus Cole, smooth talker who runs a computer company. He's been trying to get the board to spend millions on a risky project. We've been saying no until now. Mr. Peterson added seriously. If Tom becomes assistant manager and supports it. She's using my son, I said, the truth burning like fire inside me. There's more, I continued, explaining Linda's comment about the mystery owner and Tom eventually inheriting. Mr. Peterson and Mrs. Davis looked at each other. Betty, Mr. Peterson said gently, I think Linda is planning for the long future. If she believes Tom will inherit controlling interest, she's setting herself up. Building influence and connections for when that happens, Mrs. Davis finished. My hands shook. And Tom, where does he fit in her plans? Neither answered, but their silence told me everything. There's something else, I admitted. Last night I heard a phone conversation. Linda's been pushing Tom to have me move to Sunset Gardens retirement home. She says I'm becoming too difficult to handle and it would be better for everyone. Mr. Peterson's thick eyebrows went up. That's a very expensive place. Yes, I said. And apparently Tom would need to sell my house to afford it. The house that was completely paid for. The house that, while small, was worth a lot of money now. This is getting scary, Betty, Mrs. Davis said. Linda seems to be controlling both Tom's career and your living situation. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the garden Harold and I had planted together. I made a promise to my husband, I said quietly. But I don't think he would want this. What do you want to do? Mr. Peterson asked. I turned back to them, my mind made up. I want to protect my son and the bank we built. Not by telling everything right away. That might just push Tom further into Linda's control. A more careful approach then, Mrs. Davis suggested. He nodded. I'm going to attend the board meeting next week. Not as Betty Rivers, but as Mrs. Johnson, the mystery shareholder. It's time I saw exactly what Linda and this Marcus are planning. And if Tom recognizes you? Mr. Peterson asked. I smiled with determination. Linda has made it very clear that no one expects to see Betty Rivers in a boardroom. Sometimes being invisible has its advantages. As Mr. Peterson and Mrs. Davis left, making plans for the meeting, I felt calm strength settle over me. Linda thought she was playing a smart game, using my son as a piece in her plans. She had no idea she was playing against the woman who had built the game board itself. The day of the board meeting came with heavy rain, perfect for the storm I felt inside. I stared at my reflection in the bedroom mirror, barely knowing myself. Gone was the simple Betty in everyday clothes. Mrs. Davis had taken me shopping for the occasion, insisting that Mrs. Johnson, mystery major shareholder, would dress the part. I wore a black suit with thin white lines, clean white shirt and low shoes that still felt strange on my feet. My usually plain gray hair had been cut into a neat style and colored a rich brown, close to my natural color before age had changed it. Mrs. Davis's hair person had shown me how to put on makeup that made my features look good without being too much. Perfect, Mrs. Davis said, appearing behind me. You look exactly like what you are, a powerful businesswoman who owns 51% of a successful bank. I touched the delicate gold necklace that had been Harold's gift on our 25th anniversary. Harold would hardly know me. Mrs. Davis squeezed my shoulder. He'd be proud. Betty, you're protecting everything you built together. The Riverside Bank boardroom was on the top floor with huge windows looking over the city. I entered behind Mrs. Davis, who had taught me thoroughly on how Mrs. Johnson would act. Confident, quiet, watching. Heads turned as we entered. I recognized most of the board members from the reports Mr. Peterson gave me, though I'd only met a few in person over the years. Tom sat near the middle of the table, looking nervous. At the far end sat Linda, who technically had no job at the bank, but had apparently been invited for this special presentation. Beside her was a handsome man in his early 40s. Marcus Cole, I guessed. "Ah, Mrs. Davis," said Richard Foster, the board chairman. "And this must be Mrs. Johnson," Mrs. Davis said smoothly. "She's here to watch today's proceedings." Whispers went around the room. The mystery shareholder had sent helpers to meetings for years, but had never appeared in person. I nodded politely but said nothing, taking a seat near the head of the table. Tom was staring at me with a slight frown, like he was trying to remember my face. I kept my face neutral, though my heart was beating fast. Would he recognize his own mother under the fancy suit and new hair? His eyes moved on. Linda leaned over to whisper something to Marcus, both looking suspiciously at me. I opened the leather folder Mrs. Davis had given me, acting busy reading the meeting agenda. The meeting started with regular business first. I spoke only when needed, keeping my comments short and direct as Mrs. Davis had taught me. Tom kept looking at me, that puzzled look coming back. Linda was less subtle, openly studying me with narrow eyes. Finally, Richard announced, "Next item, presentation on the proposed computer system upgrade by Tom Rivers." Tom stood, straightened his tie nervously, and moved to the front of the room. As he began his presentation, I could see Harold in him. The same honest intelligence, the careful way he explained difficult ideas. But I also saw something Harold never had, a feeling of desperation, a need to impress at any cost. His plan involved buying new computers and software with a big investment in experimental technology designed by Marcus's company. The numbers he showed were very ambitious, almost like fantasy. "As you can see," Tom concluded, "our expected profit would be 32% within 20 months with potential for much bigger growth after that." I looked around the table. Most board members looked doubtful. Marcus Cole, however, was nodding enthusiastically. "Very impressive, Tom," Marcus said. "If I may add, my company has extensive experience in both areas. We could make immediate improvements, significantly reducing typical startup costs." Linda beamed at Tom with fake pride. I felt sick watching her act. Richard looked unconvinced. "The investment required is substantial, and these projections seem actually conservative," Marcus interrupted smoothly. "My team has compiled extensive market research." I'd heard enough. I cleared my throat softly and the room fell silent. All eyes turned to me. "Mr. Rivers," I said, addressing my own son formally, "your enthusiasm is admirable. However, I see several problems with your proposal." I proceeded to ask pointed questions about his market analysis, risk assessment, and backup planning. With each question, Tom's confidence visibly deflated. Linda's expression turned from confusion to anger. "Who exactly are you to question this proposal?" she finally interrupted. "Tom has worked extremely hard on this presentation." "Linda," Tom muttered, embarrassed by her outburst. "No, Tom," she snapped. "Some mystery shareholder who never bothers to show up suddenly appears and starts undermining you." I met her eyes steadily. "Mrs. Rivers, I'm simply doing careful checking as a major investor in this bank. Your husband's proposal risks millions of dollars on projections that appear to have been influenced by outside interests." I looked meaningfully at Marcus. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Richard and other board members were watching the exchange with growing interest. "I move that we postpone this proposal pending further review," I said calmly. "And I suggest we investigate Mr. Cole's relationship with Riverside Bank more thoroughly before proceeding with any partnership." The vote was quick and clear. Tom's proposal was postponed. As the meeting ended, Linda stormed out, Marcus following close behind. Tom lingered, looking defeated. I approached him, conflicted. Part of me wanted to comfort him as his mother. Instead, I spoke as Mrs. Johnson. "Mr. Rivers, your basic idea has merit. The execution needs work. I'd be willing to discuss improvements if you're interested." He looked up surprised. "Thank you, Mrs. Johnson. I'd appreciate that." As I turned to leave, he added, "Have we met before? You seem familiar." My heart skipped. Perhaps in passing. "I knew your father." His eyes widened slightly, but before he could respond, Mrs. Davis appeared at my elbow, guiding me toward the door. In the elevator, I finally exhaled. That was harder than I expected. "You did well," Mrs. Davis assured me. "The board was impressed. And you've bought time to address the real problem." "Linda," I said. "And this Marcus person, they're using my son. What will you do now?" Mrs. Davis asked as we reached the lobby. I stared at my unfamiliar reflection in the mirrored elevator doors. The decision I'd been wrestling with for days became clear in that moment. "It's time to tell Tom the truth," I said quietly. "Not everything at once. That might push him away, but enough so he understands what's really happening." Mrs. Davis nodded. "When?" "I'll invite him to dinner tomorrow." Alone. As we stepped outside into the rain, I felt both terrified and determined. 3 years of honoring Harold's wishes, of staying quiet while Linda gradually separated my son from me. Tomorrow would change everything. What I didn't know then was that Linda had already set a different plan in motion, one that would force my hand sooner than I expected. I barely slept that night, practicing what I would say to Tom when he came for dinner. By morning, dark clouds had gathered both outside my window and inside my mind. I was making coffee when my phone rang. "Betty, we have a situation," Mr. Peterson said without introduction. "Linda's made a move. She's convinced Tom to call an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning." My hand froze on the coffee pot. "What? On what grounds?" "They're proposing a restructuring of the management team. If it passes, several board members loyal to you would be removed." His voice tightened. "And there's more. She somehow found out that Mrs. Johnson is connected to you." "How is that possible?" I asked, my mind racing. "I don't know, but Tom called Mrs. Davis this morning asking direct questions about your involvement." He sounded upset. I set the coffee pot down with a shaking hand. "I was going to tell him everything tonight." "You may not have that luxury," Mr. Peterson cautioned. "Betty, if Linda has convinced Tom you've been lying to him all these years." The doorbell rang, interrupting him. "Someone's here. I'll call you back." Through the peephole, I saw Tom standing on my porch, his expression stormy. I took a deep breath and opened the door. "Tom, I wasn't expecting you until—" "Were you ever going to tell me?" he demanded, pushing past me into the hallway. "Or was the plan to keep lying to me forever?" I closed the door, my heart pounding. "Tom, please let me explain." "Explain what?" "That you're actually Mrs. Johnson. That you've owned the bank all this time. That my entire career has been." He ran his hands through his hair, that gesture so like his father's. "What mother? A joke? Some kind of test?" "No," I said firmly. "Never that. Please sit down. Let me tell you everything." Reluctantly, he followed me to the living room but remained standing, arms crossed. "How did you find out?" asked gently. "Linda," he said. "She hired a private investigator after the board meeting. She thought there was something strange about this Johnson person who appeared out of nowhere and ruined my proposal." I closed my eyes briefly. "Of course she did." "Is it true?" Tom demanded. "Do you control Riverside Bank?" I looked my son in the eyes. "Yes. Your father and I founded the bank before you were born. When he died, I inherited his shares. I own 51% of Riverside Bank." Tom stared at me as if seeing a stranger. "All these years you've been living here in this small house, driving that old car while you were worth millions?" "Yes," I confirmed. "Why?" The word came out like an accusation. "Why would you hide this? Why would you let me work there not knowing? Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is?" "It was your father's wish," I said. "He wanted you to succeed on your own merit, not because you were the owner's son. He believed it would make you stronger, more independent. And you?" Tom's voice cracked slightly. "What did you want?" The question pierced my heart. I wanted to honor your father's dying wish. But I also wanted to protect you. Scoff. Protect me. From what? Success. Wealth. Knowing my own heritage. From never knowing if you'd earned your position, I explained, willing him to understand. From the doubt that would have followed you if everyone knew you were the boss's son. He was silent for a long moment, processing. And the board meeting yesterday, what was that about? I chose my words carefully. I had concerns about the proposal. The projections seemed unrealistic, and I was worried about the involvement of Marcus Cole. His eyes narrowed. What about Marcus? This was the delicate part. How much to reveal about Linda without pushing Tom further away? I have reason to believe his involvement may not be in the best interests of the bank. Linda says he's brilliant. Tom's defensive tone told me everything about his state of mind. She says the board is too conservative, afraid of innovation. Tom, I said gently, have you looked into Marcus's background? His track record with other companies? Uncertainty flickered across his face. Linda did the research. I think you should do your own, I suggested. Before tomorrow's board meeting. His jaw tightened. You know about that too. Yes, I admitted. And I need you to understand something important, Tom. The restructuring Linda is proposing would remove the very people who helped your father build this bank. People who have protected its integrity for decades. Linda says they're blocking progress, he countered, but with less conviction. I moved to my desk and pulled out a folder, the one Mr. Peterson had prepared months ago when we first noticed Marcus Cole circling the bank. This contains information about Cole's previous ventures. For companies that invested in his computer upgrade plans. All 4 suffered significant losses. 2 filed for bankruptcy. Tom hesitated, then took the folder. Why should I believe anything you say now? You've been lying to me for years. The accusation stung, but I understood his pain. I haven't been completely honest about my role at Riverside Bank. That's true. But I have never lied about loving you or wanting what's best for you. He looked away, blinking rapidly. Tom, I said softly. Think about how quickly Linda found this information about me. Less than 24 hours after the meeting. She must have already been investigating. Already suspicious. She was protecting me, he insisted, but doubt had crept into his voice. Was she? Yes. Or was she protecting her own interests? He stood abruptly. I need time to think, to process all this. Of course, I said, rising too. But Tom, please. Before tomorrow's meeting, look at that folder and ask yourself why Linda is pushing so hard for this restructuring. The door, he paused. All those board meetings over the years. You were there, weren't you? As Mrs. Johnson's representative, I nodded. I wanted to stay connected to what your father and I built. And to you. Something shifted in his expression. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a crack in his anger. The board meeting is at 9 tomorrow, he said. I suppose you'll be there. I will, I confirmed. As myself this time. No more disguises. After he left, I called Mr. Peterson and Mrs. Davis, updating them on the confrontation. We spent hours planning, calling loyal board members, preparing for every possible scenario Linda might unleash. By evening I was exhausted but resolved. Tomorrow would decide everything. Not just the future of Riverside Bank but my relationship with my son. As I prepared for bed, my phone chimed with a text message from an unknown number. It contained a single photo. Tom and Linda having dinner with Marcus Cole. All 3 looking serious and determined. Beneath the photo was a message. They're planning something bigger than a restructuring. Be prepared. I stared at the screen, wondering who my mysterious ally was. Then I recognized the restaurant in the background and the waitress partially visible at the edge of the frame. It was Susan, Harold's sister, who had worked at that restaurant for years. She had recognized Tom and Linda, and clearly found their conversation concerning enough to warn me. I sent back a simple thank you and set my phone aside, a plan forming in my mind. If Linda wanted to play hardball, she'd find I was more than capable of stepping up to the plate. Tomorrow, Betty Rivers would finally take her rightful place at the head of the table. The Riverside Bank boardroom fell silent as I walked in. No disguise today. Just Betty Rivers in a simple but elegant navy suit. My silver hair neatly styled. Harold's necklace on my neck. Board members who had known me for years, but only as Tom's mother, or as Mrs. Davis's mysterious client, stared in confusion. Linda, seated beside Tom near the head of the table, looked like she'd been slapped. Marcus Cole on Tom's other side leaned over to whisper something in his ear. "What is she doing here?" Linda hissed loudly enough for everyone to hear. "This is a closed board meeting." Richard Foster, the chairman, looked equally confused. "Mrs. Rivers, I'm afraid." "It's quite all right, Richard," I said calmly, placing my leather folder on the table. "I believe you'll find I have every right to be here." Mr. Peterson entered behind me carrying his briefcase. "Mrs. Rivers is here in her capacity as majority shareholder of Riverside Bank," he announced. "She holds 51% of the company's shares." A collective gasp rippled through the room. All eyes turned to Tom, who sat rigid, his expression unreadable. "This is ridiculous," Linda sputtered. "Tom's father owned the bank. The shares are in a trust until Tom turns 45, I finished for her. "Yes, a small portion are, but the controlling interest passed to me upon Harold's death." Richard looked bewildered. "But Mrs. Davis has been voting those shares for years as my representative," I confirmed, "and as Mrs. Johnson when necessary." Another shock wave visibly passed through the room. Marcus Cole's smooth composure finally cracked. "Mrs. Rivers has documentation confirming all of this," Mr. Peterson added, pulling papers from his briefcase, "which I'll happily provide to each board member, but perhaps we should address the purpose of today's emergency meeting first." I took a seat directly across from Tom, our eyes meeting briefly before he looked away. The hurt was still there, but something else too: uncertainty. "Yes, let's proceed," Richard agreed, gathering himself. "Tom, you called this meeting to propose restructuring the management team." Tom cleared his throat. "Actually, in light of recent information, I'd like to propose a different agenda." Linda whipped her head around to stare at him. "Tom, we discussed this. Stick to the plan." A tense silence followed. Tom looked down at the folder in front of him, the one I'd given him the day before, containing all the evidence about Marcus Cole's failed ventures. "I spent last night doing additional research," Tom said slowly, "about our bank's history, about Marcus Cole's business record, and about the computer system proposal." He looked up, his gaze moving from Linda to Marcus to me. "I found some troubling inconsistencies." "Tom," Linda warned, her voice tight. He ignored her. "Mr. Cole has been involved with 4 companies that attempted similar computer upgrades. All 4 suffered significant losses." Marcus's smile turned cold. "Business involves risk, Tom. Your father understood that." "My father," Tom repeated, emphasis on the word, "built this bank with careful growth strategies. He never gambled with his employees' livelihoods." I felt a surge of pride hearing Tom defend Harold's principles. "Furthermore," Tom continued, "I discovered that the projections in my proposal were based on manipulated data." He turned to Linda. "Data you helped prepare." Linda's face flushed. "You're being ridiculous." "I was helping you." "Were you?" Tom challenged. "Or were you helping Marcus secure a multi-million-dollar consulting contract?" Marcus stood abruptly. "I don't have to sit here and listen to these accusations." "Actually you do," I interjected, "because the board should also know about your previous relationship with Digital Solutions Incorporated, the company you recommended as our computer supplier." I nodded to Mr. Peterson, who distributed more documents. "A company where you were previously a silent partner and still receive consulting fees." The board members murmured as they reviewed the evidence. "This is a witch hunt," Marcus snapped. Tom stood slowly. "No, it's due diligence. Something I should have done before bringing this proposal forward. He faced the board. I withdraw my proposal for computer system upgrades and recommend we sever all ties with Cole Consulting. Tom, Linda grabbed his arm. You're ruining everything. He pulled away from her. No, Linda. I'm stopping us from making a terrible mistake. He turned to face her fully. Just like I'm stopping us from making a terrible mistake about my mother. Linda's expression turned venomous. Your pathetic mother has been lying to you for years. She's been controlling your career, manipulating everything from the shadows. My mother, Tom said quietly, has been honoring my father's wishes while protecting the bank they built together. He looked at me then, his eyes softening. Something I'm only beginning to understand. Richard cleared his throat. In light of these revelations, I believe we should adjourn to consider next steps. As the board members filed out, Linda remained seated, her face a mask of fury. You've ruined everything, she hissed at me. We had it all planned. The promotion, the house, everything. You had it planned, Tom corrected her. Using me as your stepping stone. Don't be naive, Tom, she snapped. Everyone uses everyone. Your precious mother used you too. Keeping you in the dark while she controlled everything. There's a difference, he replied. She did it out of love. You did it out of greed. Linda grabbed her purse and stood. This isn't over, she threatened, glaring at both of us before storming out, Marcus trailing behind her. Finally, Tom and I were alone in the boardroom. I'm still angry with you, he said after a long silence. You should have told me the truth years ago. I know, I admitted. Keeping your father's promise became a habit, then a shield. I was afraid if I told you, I'd lose you. Instead, you almost lost me to Linda's manipulations, he shook his head. When did you know about her and Marcus? I suspected at the bank party, I said, then confirmed it when I overheard them at the office. He nodded slowly. Last night after I left your house, I called some former colleagues who had worked with Marcus. Everything you said was true. His voice caught. And then I started wondering what else you were right about. Linda asked gently. I checked her phone while she was in the shower, he admitted. Text messages between her and Marcus. They've been planning this for months, using me as their ticket into the bank. He looked up, his eyes shining with unshed tears. Was I that blind, Mom? The word Mom, so simple, so powerful, broke something open inside me. We see what we want to see in the people we love, I said softly. I've made my own mistakes. Tom came around the table and took the seat beside me. What happens now? With the bank? With us? I reached for his hand. That's up to you. Your father wanted you to make your own way, and you have. You're a good businessman, Tom, with or without the Rivers name behind you. And Linda. I squeezed his hand. Also your decision. But speaking as both your mother and the majority shareholder of this bank, I'd recommend some serious reconsideration of that relationship. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Already ahead of you. I packed a bag this morning. 3 months later, I sat in the same boardroom, watching with pride as Tom presented a new proposal, a carefully researched plan for expanding our small business loan program. Linda was gone from his life, though the divorce proceedings were just beginning. Marcus Cole had disappeared, moving on to other potential targets. Tom had moved into the guest room in my house temporarily, he said, though we both knew he was healing from more than just a failed marriage. He was reconnecting with his roots, with a legacy his father and I had built. And so, Tom concluded his presentation, I believe this expansion stays true to Riverside's core values while positioning us for sustainable growth. Thank you, Tom, I said from my place at the head of the table, a position I had finally publicly claimed. The board will vote now. The proposal passed unanimously. As the meeting adjourned, Richard approached me. Betty, I've been meaning to tell you. Harold would be proud of how you've handled everything. I smiled, touching the necklace on my neck. I think he would be prouder of Tom for finding his own way, just as Harold wanted. Later that evening, Tom and I sat on the back porch of our home, watching the sunset, much as Harold and I had done for so many years. "Mom," he said thoughtfully, "I've been thinking about the bank name." "Oh." I took a sip of my tea. "Everyone associates Riverside with Dad, but you were always there too. Maybe it's time for a small change." Nothing dramatic, just acknowledging the full story. "What did you have in mind?" I asked. "Riverside and Johnson Bank," he suggested, honoring both legacies. I felt tears prick my eyes. "Your father would like that. And the mysterious Mrs. Johnson?" Tom asked with a small smile. "Will she make any more appearances?" I laughed softly. "I don't think so. Betty Rivers is finally ready to step into the light." As the last rays of sun gilded the garden Harold and I had planted, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. Linda had called me a cleaning lady who wouldn't go away, never knowing that I was actually the foundation of everything she coveted. Now the truth was out, and with it came not the revenge I might have sought, but something far more valuable: redemption, reconnection, and the chance to finally honor both Harold's legacy and my own. Sometimes, I reflected, the greatest power comes not from hiding in the shadows, but from finally stepping forward to claim your rightful place in the sun. The cleaning lady had shown that she was actually the one who owned the whole building. 6 months after that confrontation in the boardroom, life had settled into a new rhythm. Tom was thriving in his role at the bank, no longer burdened by Linda's manipulations or the weight of secrets. He had officially moved back into his childhood home, not out of necessity but out of choice. We were rebuilding our relationship slowly and carefully. One evening, as we reviewed the quarterly reports together, Tom looked up from his papers. "Mom, I have something to tell you." My heart skipped. "What is it?" "I've been thinking about Dad's original wish. About me earning my place." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I want to step down from my current position." I stared at him. "Tom, you don't have to." "Yes, I do," he interrupted gently. "Not because I'm ashamed of being your son, but because I want to truly earn every promotion from here on out. I want to start over, knowing who I am and where I come from, but proving myself without any shadow of doubt." I felt a mix of pride and concern. "Are you sure about this?" "Completely," he said with a smile that reminded me so much of Harold. "I'll take a position at another bank, work my way up honestly, and when I'm ready, really ready, maybe I'll come back to Riverside and Johnson Bank as someone who has truly earned his place." That night, I called Mr. Peterson to discuss the implications of Tom's decision. "It's noble," he said, "but unnecessary." "That's what makes it so right," I replied. Harold wanted Tom to succeed on his own merits. This is Tom choosing to do exactly that, with full knowledge of what he's walking away from. 3 weeks later, I stood in the lobby of Riverside and Johnson Bank, watching Tom pack up his office. Several colleagues had stopped by to wish him well, puzzled by his decision to leave such a promising position. "You ready for this?" I asked as he closed his last box. "More ready than I've ever been," he said. "For the first time in my life, I know exactly who I am and what I want to achieve." As we walked to the parking garage together, Tom carrying his belongings to start fresh at a smaller community bank across town, I felt an overwhelming sense of completion. Harold's vision was finally being fulfilled, not in the way he had planned, but in a way that honored his deepest intentions. "Mom," Tom said as we reached our cars. "Thank you." "For what?" "For keeping Dad's promise, even when it cost you so much. For protecting me, even from yourself." I hugged him tightly. "That's what mothers do, sweetheart." As I watched him drive away to start his new job, I thought about the journey we had all taken. Linda had called me a cleaning lady, dismissing me as someone who cleaned up other people's messes. In a way, she had been right. I had spent years cleaning up the mess that secrets and good intentions could create. But I had also learned that sometimes, the greatest act of love is knowing when to step out of the shadows and into the light. The leech she had mocked had turned out to be the foundation that supported everything. 1 year later, I received a call that made my heart swell with pride. Tom had been promoted to assistant manager at his new bank, entirely on his own merits. His supervisor had specifically mentioned his integrity, work ethic, and innovative ideas. "Congratulations," I said when he called to tell me the news. "How does it feel?" "Incredible," he said, and I could hear the genuine joy in his voice. "I know without a doubt that I earned this. Every step of the way." "Your father would be so proud," I said, touching Harold's necklace as I often did when thinking of him. "I hope so," Tom replied. "And Mom, I've been thinking, in a few more years when I'm ready, I'd like to come home. To Riverside and Johnson Bank. Not as the owner's son, but as someone who has proven himself in the industry." "The door will always be open," I assured him. "But only when you're ready." That evening, I sat in Harold's old study, looking through photo albums from the early days of our bank. There was one picture that always made me smile. Harold and me, covered in paint, renovating our first office space. We looked exhausted but hopeful, ready to take on the world together. I had kept the promise I made to Harold, but I had also learned that promises sometimes need to evolve. He had wanted Tom to succeed on his own, and Tom was doing exactly that. But Harold had also built this bank as a legacy for our son, and someday when Tom was truly ready, he would claim that legacy with pride and confidence. Linda was long gone from our lives, her schemes exposed and her manipulations powerless. Marcus Cole had moved on to other targets, his reputation in our industry thoroughly destroyed. Justice had been served, not through revenge but through truth. As I prepared for bed that night, I reflected on the lessons learned from this whole ordeal. Sometimes the people we trust most are the ones who see us as obstacles to their ambitions. Sometimes keeping a promise means knowing when to break our silence. And sometimes the greatest strength comes not from hiding who we are, but from finally revealing our true selves. The cleaning lady Linda had dismissed had cleaned house in ways she never could have imagined, sweeping away the lies and manipulation to reveal the truth underneath. 2 years after Tom left to make his own way, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I decided to step back from day-to-day operations at Riverside and Johnson Bank. Not to retire completely, but to take on a more advisory role. I wanted to travel, to see the world that Harold and I had always planned to explore together but never had the chance. My first trip was to the small coastal town where Harold had proposed, a place we had always meant to revisit. As I walked along the beach where we had once dreamed of our future, I felt his presence with me. "We did it, Harold," I whispered to the wind. "Tom is going to be fine. Better than fine. He's going to be extraordinary." The waves lapped at my feet, and I could almost hear Harold's voice carried on the ocean breeze. "I always knew you'd find the right way, Betty. You always did have better judgment than me." I spent a week in that little town, walking the same paths Harold and I had walked as young lovers, remembering not just the dreams we had shared, but the partnership we had built. When I returned home, I found a letter waiting for me from Tom. "Dear Mom," it read, "I wanted to let you know that I've been offered a position as regional manager at my current bank. It's a significant promotion, and it means I'm ready for the next step in my journey. I'm not ready to come home yet, but I'm getting closer. Thank you for giving me the space to become the man I was meant to be. Thank you for keeping Dad's promise, and thank you for knowing when it was time to let me go. I love you more than words can express. Your proud son, Tom." I held the letter to my heart and cried tears of pure joy. Harold had been right to want Tom to make his own way, and I had been right to protect that vision, even when it meant enduring Linda's cruelty and manipulation. But most importantly, Tom had been right to choose his own path forward, armed with knowledge and integrity. The legacy we had built was safe in hands that had truly earned the right to hold it. As I sat in my garden that evening, surrounded by the flowers Harold and I had planted together, I realized that the story of the leech was really a story about roots. Linda had seen me as a parasite, taking from others. But I had actually been the root system, providing strength and nourishment to everything around me, often invisibly, always generously. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Mrs. Davis, calling with news from the bank. "Betty, I thought you'd want to know. We just received an inquiry from a major business magazine. They want to do a feature story on successful family businesses, and Riverside and Johnson Bank is on their list." Smiled. "That's wonderful, but I'm not sure we qualify as a typical family business anymore." "That's exactly why they're interested," Mrs. Davis explained. "They want to tell the story of how you've managed to preserve family values while ensuring merit-based advancement. They think it's a model other family businesses could learn from." I considered the offer. A year ago, I would have declined, preferring to remain in the shadows. But I was no longer the woman who hid her accomplishments or downplayed her contributions. "Set up the interview," I decided. It's time our story was told properly. The interview, when it happened, was more emotional than I had expected. The reporter, a young woman about Tom's age, was fascinated by the unconventional way we had handled succession and family dynamics. "What advice would you give to other business owners facing similar challenges?" she asked. I thought carefully before answering. "Trust your children enough to let them find their own way, but love them enough to be there when they need guidance. Don't let others define your worth or your family's story. And remember that sometimes the greatest act of love is stepping back, but sometimes it's stepping forward. Knowing which moment calls for which action, that's the real challenge." The article, when it was published 6 months later, was titled "The Foundation: How One Woman Built an Empire by Knowing When to Lead and When to Follow." It became one of the magazine's most popular pieces, inspiring other family business owners to reconsider their own approaches to legacy and succession. But the greatest reward came 3 months after the article's publication, when Tom called with news that made my heart soar. "Mom, I've been offered the position of president at First National Bank downtown. It's a huge opportunity, and I'm ready for it. But more importantly, I think I'm finally ready to come home in a few years. Not as your son who needs protecting, but as your partner who can help build on what you and Dad created." As I hung up the phone, I looked up at Harold's picture on the mantelpiece and smiled. "We did it, my love. Our boy is ready to fly, and when he comes home, he'll land as the man we always knew he could become." The cleaning lady had indeed cleaned house, but more than that, she had swept away all the obstacles to let her family's true strength shine through.